The screams of birds woke me that morning. Not the usual chirping or squawking you hear in the Everglades, but something different. Something wrong. I've been a park ranger here for 15 years, and you learn to tell when nature is trying to warn you. My name is James Harrison, and this is the story of how I lost my team in the summer of 1971. A story I've never told anyone, until now. It was a hot June morning when everything started. The air was thick enough to chew, and the mosquitoes were having their usual breakfast, me. I was out on my patrol boat checking the deeper parts of the swamp. The sun hadn't fully risen yet and fog was still clinging to the water like a white blanket. Just another day in paradise, I muttered to myself, swatting another mosquito. After 15 years as a ranger and a lifetime studying marine biology, I thought I knew every inch of these wetlands, every tree, every gator, every bird call. Boy, was I wrong. The first thing that caught my eye was the water. Usually it moves in certain ways. Wind pushes it, fish disturb it, gators make ripples. But that morning I saw patterns I'd never seen before. Perfect circles, like someone had dropped giant rocks in the water, but there were no rocks. The circles just appeared on their own, spreading out in ways that didn't make sense. I cut the boat's engine and drifted closer. The silence hit me then. No birds, no insects. Even the gators that usually sun themselves on the banks were gone. In the Everglades, silence is never a good thing. My radio crackled. "Harrison, you out there?" It was Linda from the ranger station. "We've got something weird at marker 17. Can you check it out?" "On my way," I replied. But when I turned the key, my boat's engine just coughed and died. That's when I noticed the fog was getting thicker, even though the sun was rising. It shouldn't do that. Fog burns off in the morning heat, but this fog was growing. Through the whiteness, I saw something glowing under the water. Not like a flashlight or a boat light, but more like those deep-sea fish with their own light. Blue-green, pulsing slowly. And it was big, maybe the size of a car. I reached for my camera, and that's when I saw it move. Whatever it wasn't a fish. The shape was all wrong, more like a person, a very, very big person, swimming deeper into the dark water. The air suddenly felt cold, which is impossible in the Everglades in June. My hands shook as I tried the engine again. This time it started, and I've never been so happy to hear that old motor roar to life. As I turned the boat around, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. Standing in the water near the bank was what looked like an old Native American statue, half buried in mud. I'd patrolled this area hundreds of times, but I'd never seen it before. Its eyes seemed to follow me as I sped away. I should have reported what I saw right then, should have called it in. But who would believe me? More importantly, what would they do if they did believe me? That was my first mistake, not my last. Not by a long shot. I didn't know it then, but that morning was the beginning of the end. The day something ancient woke up in my swamp. Something that had been sleeping there for a very, very long time, and it was hungry. Back at the ranger station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept seeing that strange glow in my mind, but I had work to do. Linda had called about marker 17, and I needed to check it out. "James, you look like you've seen a ghost," Linda said when I walked in. She'd been dispatching for the park for 20 years and could read people like books. "What happened out there?" "Nothing," I lied, grabbing my thermos to fill it with coffee. "What's the problem at marker 17? She handed me a report. 3 boats found empty this morning, just drifting. All their gear still on board, engines running, but no people. My hands got sweaty as I read the report. 1 missing boat could be an accident. 2 might be a coincidence. But 3? That wasn't right. "There's more," Linda said quietly. "Look at this." She spread out a map on her desk. Red pins marked where each boat was found. They made a perfect circle around the area where I'd seen that strange glow. I drove out to the first boat. It was a small fishing boat now tied up at our dock. Everything was normal. Tackle boxes open, half-empty water bottles, even a sandwich with 1 bite taken out. Like the people had just vanished. The radio crackled. "Harrison?" It was Pete, another ranger. "You need to see this. I'm at the OE." Old Indian burial mound. On my way, I said, but my stomach felt like ice. The burial mound was right where I'd seen that statue this morning. When I got there, Pete was standing by the water's edge looking scared. "Watch this," he said, throwing a stick into the water. Instead of floating away with the current, the stick moved in a perfect circle, then sank straight down. "Water doesn't move like that," I said. "No, it doesn't." Pete pointed to the shore. "And those weren't here yesterday. Footprints, big ones. They came out of the water and went back in. But they weren't gator tracks or human prints. They were something else. And they glowed faintly, like someone had spilled green paint that wouldn't dry." We followed the tracks to the burial mound. The statue I'd seen that morning was gone, but the ground around it was torn up, like something had clawed its way out. "James," Pete's voice shook, "look at the water." The sun was setting now, and in the fading light I saw them. Lights under the water, dozens of them. Blue-green, pulsing, moving in patterns that looked almost like writing. "We need to call this in," Pete said. "Get a search team out here." I nodded, but something in my gut told me a regular search team wouldn't be enough. Not for this. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those empty boats, the strange tracks, the lights in the water. In 15 years, I'd seen gators. Take boats, storms sink them, people get lost. But this was different. My phone rang at midnight. It was Linda. "James? The water samples from Marker 17 just came back." She paused. "The lab says they've never seen anything like it. The water's changing. And James? They found something else in it. Something that shouldn't be possible." "What?" I asked. But I already knew it would be bad. "DNA," she said. "But it's not from anything they've ever seen before, and it's active. Growing. Whatever's in our swamp, James. It's just getting started." I looked out my window at the dark swamp. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of the water. Because now I knew we weren't dealing with gators or snakes or any normal danger. Something ancient had woken up in my swamp, and it was starting to hunt. The next morning, I met with the team they sent to help us. There were 5 of them. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who studied water creatures, Tom Roberts, who knew all about old Indian sites, Mike and Jenny from the rescue team, and Dave, who had all sorts of fancy equipment to test the water. We set up our base camp near where the boats had gone missing. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was clear blue. "These readings don't make sense," Dave said, staring at his equipment. "The water. It's like it's alive somehow." Sarah walked over to look at his screens. "That's impossible. Water can't—" She stopped talking suddenly, her face going pale. "What is it?" I asked. "Look at the water," she whispered. "Just look carefully." We all went to the edge of the bank. At first I didn't see anything strange. Then I noticed it. The water wasn't just moving with the wind or current. It was making shapes, like when you drop food coloring in water, but there was no food coloring. The shapes looked like letters from some language I'd never seen. Tom took pictures and compared them to his books about Native American writing. "This is older," he said, shaking his head. "Much older." That's when Jenny screamed. We ran to where she was standing. She pointed at something half buried in the mud. It looked like a piece of old pottery, but it was glowing with that same blue-green light I'd seen before. "Don't touch it," I warned, but Mike had already picked it up. "It's warm," he said, "like it's got a battery inside or something." Then his eyes went weird, like he was looking at something far away. Can you guys hear that?" "Hear what?" I asked. "The singing," he said softly. "It's beautiful." Before any of us could stop him, Mike walked straight into the water. We yelled for him to come back, but it was like he couldn't hear us. He just kept walking deeper and deeper. Sarah and Dave tried to go after him, but I held them back. Something in my gut told me that would be a very bad idea. We watched, helpless, as Mike went under the water. The last thing we saw was his hand. reaching up, still holding that glowing piece of pottery. Then he was gone. Jenny was crying. Sarah was trying to call for help on the radio, but all we got was static. And Tom was writing everything down like crazy in his notebook. "Look at this," he said, showing us his research. "Every 100 years people go missing in this exact spot. And every time there are reports of lights in the water and strange singing. Why didn't anybody investigate before?" Dave asked. "They did," Tom said quietly. "But the people who investigated, they've vanished too." The sun was starting to set, and fog was rolling in again. We all jumped when we heard a splash nearby. "Please, tell me that was a gator," Jenny whispered. But it wasn't. In the fog we could see something moving. Something big, and it was glowing. "Pack up," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Pack up right now. We need to—" The radio suddenly came to life, crackling with static, and through the static we heard Mike's voice singing, but it didn't sound like Mike anymore. It sounded like something else was using his voice. "Oh God," Jenny said. "What's happening?" I looked at the water, at the fog, at my team's scared faces. I'd spent my whole life in these swamps. I thought I knew every danger, every threat. But now I realized we weren't the top of the food chain anymore. Something old had woken up, something that could control water, create lights, and make people do things they would never do. And it had just taken one of our team. We had to find Mike. But as the fog got thicker and the singing got louder, I had a terrible feeling that the thing in the water wanted us to try. It was waiting for us. Night fell faster than usual. We huddled, in our camp, none of us wanting to say what we were all thinking. Mike was gone and we might be next. The singing hadn't stopped. It drifted across the water, sometimes sounding like Mike, sometimes like other voices. Old voices. Voices that shouldn't exist anymore. "We need to get out of here," Jenny said, her flashlight beam shaking. "Right now." But when we tried to start, the boats, none of them would work. Just like what happened to my boat yesterday, we were stuck. "Look at the water," Sarah whispered. The whole swamp was glowing now. That same blue-green light pulsing under the surface. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what the light was doing to Sarah. She stood at the water's edge, her eyes reflecting the glow. "It's so beautiful," she said, just like Mike had. "Can't you see the patterns? They're trying to tell us something. Sarah, get back." I grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. "No, you don't understand," she said, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. "They want to show us something wonderful." Tom and Dave helped me pull her back, but the damage was done. Whatever was in that water, it had gotten into her head. We tied Sarah to a chair, for her own safety, we told ourselves. But she just kept smiling and humming that strange song. "The water samples," Dave said suddenly. "They're moving." He was right. The water samples we'd collected were swirling in their containers, forming the same patterns we'd seen in the swamp. And they were starting to glow. That's when we heard the splashing. Something was coming out of the water. At first it looked human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, too fluid. Its skin glowed with swirling patterns, like ancient writing come to life. Where its face should have been, there were only more patterns, shifting and changing. Jenny screamed. I don't blame her. I wanted to scream too. The thing moved toward our camp, not walking exactly, more like flowing. Water dripped from it, but the drops moved up instead of down, floating back into its body. "Beautiful," Sarah whispered from her chair. "They've come to change us, to make us better." The creature stopped at the edge of our camp. Then it did something worse than attack us. It spoke. Not with one voice, but with many. I heard Mike's voice in there, and other voices. Some speaking languages I didn't know. "Your friend understands," it said, pointing at Sarah. "The water calls. The old ones wake. You will join us." Dave grabbed his camera, trying to take pictures. but they all came out black. Tom was frantically flipping through his books, mumbling about ancient water spirits. The thing raised its arms, and the water around our camp began to rise. Not like a flood. The water moved like it was alive, reaching for us with liquid fingers. "Run!" I shouted. But where could we run? We were surrounded by swamp, and the swamp wasn't just water anymore. It was alive. Hungry. Jenny made a break for the trees, but a wall of water rose up, cutting her off. When it fell back, she was gone. Just gone. Like Mike. "You can't fight the water," Sarah sang from her chair. "The water is everywhere, in the air, in your body, in your mind." She was right about one thing. The air was getting thick with mist, and every breath felt like drowning. My head started to spin. The world turned fuzzy around the edges. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the creature, moving closer, its watery hands reaching for us, and Sarah's voice singing that horrible, beautiful song. "The old ones are waking up," she sang, "and soon you'll all be singing too." I woke up to Dave shaking me. My clothes were soaked, and my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. "Tom's gone," Dave whispered. I dozed off for just a minute, and when I woke up, he pointed to where Tom had been sitting. All that was left was his notebook, the pages wet and filled with crazy scribbles. Sarah was still tied to her chair, but she wasn't singing anymore. She just stared at the water with that creepy smile. The sun was trying to rise, but the fog was so thick we could barely see 10 feet ahead. "We need to move," I said, but Dave shook his head. "Move where? We're surrounded by water, and the water..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. We both knew the water wasn't just water anymore. That's when Sarah started talking, but not in her voice. She spoke in Mike's voice, then Jenny's, then Tom's, and finally in that horrible, many-voiced sound of the creature. "The temple waits," she said, "deep below, where the old ones sleep, where you will all join us." "What temple?" Dave asked. I wanted to tell him not to listen, not to encourage her, but I was curious too. Sarah's head turned to us with a snap. "The one you're standing on." The ground suddenly felt different under my feet. I looked down and saw stone through the mud, old stone covered in those same glowing patterns we'd seen on the creature. "We have to get out of here," I said, grabbing Dave's arm. "Now!" We tried to run, but the fog was everywhere. Every direction looked the same. We'd take a few steps and somehow end up back where we started. It was like the swamp itself was playing tricks on us. "James," Dave said, his voice shaking. The swamp was rising again, but slowly this time, like it was enjoying our fear. The glowing water formed shapes around us, things that looked almost human but weren't. They danced and swayed, reaching for us with hands made of light and liquid. "Beautiful," Sarah sighed. "They're going to make us like them. Part of the water, part of everything." Dave started screaming. I turned and saw him sinking, being pulled down into the mud. The ground under him had turned to liquid but thick, like quicksand. I grabbed his hand and pulled as hard as I could. "Don't let go," he yelled. "Please don't let..." His hand slipped from mine. The mud swallowed him whole. Just like that, I was alone with Sarah. "Your turn," she smiled. The water creatures moved closer. Their touches felt like ice on my skin. My mind started to fog up, just like the air around me. That strange, beautiful singing filled my head, but something inside me fought back. Maybe it was my years in the swamp. Maybe it was just plain stubbornness, but I wasn't going to let this thing take me too. I grabbed Sarah's chair and started dragging it toward higher ground. She didn't fight me. She just kept smiling and humming. The water followed us, rising higher, trying to cut us off. "You can't escape," Sarah said in that many-voiced sound. "The temple calls. The old ones hunger. The water always wins." Through the fog ahead, I saw something dark and huge rising from the swamp. An ancient building covered in those glowing symbols. The temple Sarah had talked about. The water was up to my waist now, pulling at me, trying to drag me under. Each step was harder than the last. The singing in my head got louder, sweeter, more tempting. But I kept going. Because now I knew where my friends were, where the creature had taken them, and maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to save them. If I could just reach that temple, if I could just keep my mind clear for a little longer, if the water didn't take me first. The temple looked like something from a nightmare. Black stone steps rose out of the water, covered in glowing blue-green writing that moved like it was alive. The whole building hummed with a deep sound that made my teeth hurt. I dragged Sarah's chair up the steps. The water followed us like a hungry animal reaching up with glowing fingers. Sarah kept singing, her voice mixing with the sounds coming from inside the temple. "They're waiting," she said. "All of them. Mike, Jenny, Tom, Dave, they're so happy now. Part of the water, part of forever." At the top of the steps, I found a huge doorway. The symbols around it glowed brighter than the others, pulsing like a heartbeat. Inside, I could see a large room with a pool in the center. The water in the pool glowed so bright it hurt my eyes. That's when I saw them, my friends. They were different now. Their skin glowed like the creatures, and they moved like they were underwater, even though they were standing in air. They smiled when they saw me, but their eyes were wrong. Just pools of blue-green light. "Join us, James," Mike said, but his voice echoed like he was speaking from the bottom of the ocean. "The water shows you everything. All the secrets. All the power." The creature rose from the pool, bigger than before. Water dripped upward from its body, and its face was a swirling mass of those ancient symbols. "The last one," it said in its many voices. "The circle must be complete." I untied Sarah, and she walked to join the others, her feet not quite touching the ground. They all reached for me with glowing hands, but I didn't move. Instead, I pulled out Tom's notebook. While they were distracted by Sarah, I'd read his last notes. He'd figured it out. What the temple was, what the creature was, and most importantly, how to stop it. "The water must be pure," I read aloud from Tom's notes. "No salt, no poison. That's why you need this place, this temple, these special waters." The creature tilted its head, like a curious child. "You understand nothing." "I understand enough," I said, pulling a small bottle from my pocket. "Just salt water. Something so simple." But Tom's note said the creature and its powers couldn't touch anything with salt. "The circle must complete," the creature said, its voice angry now. My friends, or what used to be my friends, moved toward me. I threw the salt water into the glowing pool. The reaction was instant. The water turned dark and the creature screamed, a horrible sound like 1,000 voices crying out at once. The glowing symbols started to fade. The temple began to shake. "What have you done?" Sarah cried, but her voice was her own again. The glow was fading from her skin from all of them. "Run!" I grabbed her hand. The others stood confused, the creature's power over them weakening. "Everyone run! Now!" We ran down the steps as the temple began to sink back into the swamp. Behind us, the creature's screams turned to roars of anger. Water exploded from the pool, but it was normal water now. No more glow, no more strange patterns. We made it to solid ground just as the temple disappeared under the dark water. The fog lifted, and the sun finally broke through. My friends collapsed on the shore, coughing up water, their skin returning to normal. They were confused, scared, but alive, human again. But as we waited for rescue, I looked back at the swamp. Under the water, in the deepest part, I thought I saw a faint glow. And very quietly, almost too quiet to hear, I heard singing. The creature wasn't dead. The temple wasn't gone forever. The salt would wash away eventually. And when it did, that's why I'm telling this story now. As a warning, because every time I check the water samples from that part of the swamp, the salt levels are getting lower. The symbols are starting to appear again on the old stones. And sometimes, late at night, I hear singing in my dreams. Beautiful, terrible, singing. The water is patient, the water remembers, and the water always comes back. I never thought trees could scream, but that was before everything changed in Redwood National Park. My name is David Morrison, and I've been a ranger here for 15 years. After spending my younger days cutting down these giants as a logger, I switched sides, you could say. Now, at 47, I protect the very things I used to destroy. Funny how life works sometimes. That morning started like any other. I adjusted my glasses, scratched my graying beard, and headed out for my usual patrol. The fog was different, though, thicker than I'd ever seen it. It clung to the ancient redwoods like white fingers, making the massive trees look like they were floating in clouds. Something felt off. Maybe it was the silence. Usually our forest is alive with sounds. Birds calling, squirrels chattering, leaves rustling. But not today. Today, the quiet was so deep it made my ears ring. I checked my gear, notebook, plant samples bags, compass, and my trusty walking stick. After 25 years in these woods, between logging and ranging, I thought I knew every trail, every tree, every turn. But lately things weren't where they should be. Just yesterday I could have sworn the Peterson Trail went left at the big fallen log. Today it went right. I'm not talking about getting turned around. I mean the actual trail had moved. And the plants. Well, the plants were acting strange too. New ferns sprouted overnight, growing in patterns I'd never seen before. Some looked like they were pointing at something. Near the old Native American sacred sites where the really ancient redwoods grow, the fog got so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. That's when I first noticed the shadows. They moved differently than regular shadows should, like they had a mind of their own. I've tracked everything from bears to mountain lions in these woods, but these movements, they were something else. I pulled out my radio to check in with headquarters, something I'd done thousands of times before. Only static answered me. That's when I saw it, a pattern in the tree bark that definitely wasn't there yesterday. It looked like a face, twisted in fear, as if someone had been pressed into the wood itself, and then I heard the first scream. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. It was like the sound a tree makes when it falls, mixed with something that might have once been a person's voice. That's when I realized all those missing hikers' reports from the past few weeks might not have been just careless tourists getting lost. Something was very wrong in my forest, and I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly what. That scream led me to Thompson's Trail, where things got even stranger. The first thing I noticed was Sarah Chen's backpack hanging from a branch. Sarah was a hiker reported missing 3 days ago. The weird part? That branch was at least 30 feet high, and it wasn't there last night. I called out, "Sarah? Anyone there?" My voice seemed to get swallowed by the fog. The only answer was the soft drip of morning dew from the leaves. Taking out my notebook, I started doing what rangers do best, observing and taking notes. In just one spot, I counted 5 trees that had grown at least 10 feet overnight. That's impossible. I've studied plants my whole life, and redwoods, even young ones, grow maybe 2 feet in a good year. The bark on these trees was different too. Instead of the normal straight lines, it had swirls and patterns that almost looked like writing. Some parts reminded me of the petroglyphs in the old Native American sites, but these were fresh, like they'd been carved minutes ago. Then I found the first real clue that something was terribly wrong. Near the base of the biggest redwood, I spotted a fresh hiking boot. Just one. It was stuck in the ground like it had been growing there, with small roots already wrapping around it. I recognized the bright blue laces. This was Sarah's boot. I tried my radio again. Still nothing but static, though now it almost sounded like whispers. Following the trail deeper into the woods, I noticed more changes. Paths that had been straight, for decades now curved and twisted. New plants sprouted as I watched, not slowly like normal plants, but fast enough to see them growing. Ferns unfurled like time-lapse videos, and vines crept across the ground like snakes. The fog started moving against the wind. That's when I spotted the first clear footprint, but it wasn't human. It was huge, about 3 feet long, and looked like it was made of twisted roots and leaves. Whatever made it was walking upright, and the prints led straight to the sacred grove where most hikers had gone missing. As I stood there, my flashlight beam caught something in the trees ahead. For just a second, I saw what looked like a massive shape moving between the trunks. It was tall as the younger redwoods, and its body seemed to be made of living wood and leaves. When I blinked, it was gone. But the trees where it had been were different. Their branches now pointed toward me like fingers. The forest had always been my home, my safe place. But now, for the first time since I was a kid, I felt like prey. Something was hunting in these woods, something that could control the forest itself. I knew I should radio for backup. I knew I should wait for help. But Sarah and the other missing hikers might still be alive, and I was the only one who knew these woods well enough to find them. Taking a deep breath, I checked my compass, which was now spinning in circles, gripped my walking stick tighter and stepped onto the twisted path that led to the sacred grove. The fog closed in behind me like a door shutting. The path to the sacred grove kept changing as I walked. It was like trying to follow a snake that wouldn't stay still. My phone's GPS just showed a spinning circle, and my compass was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. But after 25 years in these woods, I had other ways to navigate. That's when I stumbled upon something that shouldn't have been there, an old logging camp. The weird thing was, I'd never seen it before, and I thought I knew every inch of this forest. The camp looked ancient, with rotting equipment and fallen cabins almost completely covered in moss. On one of the cabin walls, someone had carved words into the wood. The carvings looked old, but I could still read them. It walks among the trees, don't let it catch you looking, run before the roots rise. Below the warning was a date, 1937. My hands shook a little as I wrote everything down in my notebook. That's when I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of wood creaking and stretching like a tree growing fast, way too fast. I spun around and saw a young redwood literally pushing up from the ground. It grew as I watched, like someone had pressed fast forward on nature. In less than a minute, it was taller than me. Looking closer at the tree, but not too close, I noticed something stuck in its trunk, a piece of bright yellow fabric, the same color as Sarah Chen's hiking jacket. It was like the tree had grown around it. I needed to understand what was happening. Pulling out my phone, I opened the folder where I kept notes about local Native American legends. Last month, I'd interviewed Mrs. Redfeather, an elder from the local tribe, about the sacred grove. She'd told me stories about a forest spirit, a guardian that protected the old trees. But she'd also warned me about something else. Something that slept in the woods, something that shouldn't be awakened. According to the stories, every 50 years or so, hikers and loggers would go missing. They'd find pieces of clothing stuck in trees or personal items hanging from branches no one could reach. The tribe had marked these areas with special symbols to warn people away. I found one of those symbols now, carved into a nearby tree. It was fresh. That's when I heard voices calling for help. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Some sounded like kids, some like adults. I recognized Sarah Chen's voice among them. But there was something off about the way they echoed, like the forest itself was doing the calling. I pulled out my map and started marking where people had gone missing over the past month. The spots made a pattern, a spiral, getting closer and closer to the sacred grove. The fog was getting thicker now, but sometimes it would clear just enough to let me see things I wish I hadn't. Like the way some trees had bumps in their trunks that looked suspiciously like human faces, or how the branches seemed to reach for me when I wasn't looking directly at them. Checking my watch, I realized something else scary. I'd been walking for 6 hours, but the sun hadn't moved. It was like time itself was playing tricks. A twig snapped behind me. I turned slowly, remembering Mrs. Redfeather's warning. If you see it directly, it will take you too. There, in a small clearing, stood the old logging camp's office. Its door was open, swinging slightly in a breeze that didn't exist. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere. As I got closer, I saw they were all missing persons reports, dating back to 1937. Something moved in the shadows of that office. Something big. Something that shouldn't be there. I had two choices. I could run back the way I came, if I could even find it anymore, or I could go inside and finally learn the truth about what was happening to my forest. The thing in the shadows made the choice for me. A massive wood-like hand reached out of the darkness, grabbing the doorframe. The entire building creaked. I ran. Behind me, I heard the sound of an entire building being torn apart, and footsteps, huge, heavy footsteps, following my trail. The chase was on. Running through a forest is hard. Running through a forest that's trying to catch you is even harder. Vines shot up from the ground, trying to grab my ankles. Branches swung down like giant arms trying to catch me. Even the roots seemed to rise up just to trip me. I jumped, ducked, and dodged, using every trick I'd learned in 25 years of forest work. "Help! Over here!" Sarah's voice called from my left. "Please, someone!" Another voice shouted from my right, but I couldn't stop. The voices weren't real. They were tricks, like a hunter's bird call. The thing behind me was real enough, though. I could hear it coming. The sound of splintering wood, heavy footsteps, and trees groaning as they were pushed aside. I reached for my radio one more time, desperately hoping it would work. Through the static, I finally heard something. David, is that you?" It was Tommy, one of our new rangers. "Tommy, listen carefully," I panted while running. "Get everyone out of the north section. Something's—" The radio crackled and died. Through the static, I heard what sounded like leaves rustling and wood creaking. The forest had even gotten into our radio signals. I burst into a clearing and stopped dead in my tracks. What I saw there still gives me nightmares. Trees lined the edge of the clearing, but these weren't normal trees. People were trapped inside them, their faces and hands pressing out through the bark like they were frozen while trying to escape. Some I recognized, hikers who'd gone missing. They weren't dead, but they weren't exactly alive either. Their eyes moved following me. Among them was Sarah Chen. Half of her body was already merged with a young redwood. Her free hand reached out, moving slightly. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'll find a way to help you. I promise." The ground shook. My pursuer was getting closer. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Evidence, proof that this was real. But when I checked them, each photo just showed normal trees. This thing, whatever it was, didn't want to be documented. That's when I saw the search party. 4 of my fellow rangers walked into the clearing from the other side. Tommy was leading them. Their flashlight beams cut through the fog. "No," I whispered. Then I shouted, "Get out of here, run!" They turned toward my voice, but it was too late. The clearing had become a trap. Trees suddenly shot up from the ground in a circle around us, their trunks growing and twisting together to form a wall. We were trapped in a wooden cage. The thing that had been chasing me finally showed itself. It stepped into the clearing, and even the fog seemed to pull away from it. It was huge, maybe 20 feet tall. Its body looked like it was made of twisted trees and branches with moss for skin and leaves for hair. As it moved, parts of it kept changing. Branches becoming arms, roots becoming legs, bark flowing like water. Where its face should have been, there was a swirling pattern of leaves and shadows. Tommy and the others raised their flashlights, but the beams just passed right through it. It was like trying to shine light on smoke. The creature raised its arms and vines burst from the ground. They wrapped around Tommy first. He screamed as they pulled him toward the nearest tree. The trunk split open like a mouth, ready to swallow him. "Stop!" I shouted, stepping forward. "Take me instead." The creature turned its head toward me. The leaves where its eyes should be rustled. Everything went quiet. Then it spoke. The voice wasn't human. It sounded like wind through leaves, like creaking branches, like roots growing deep underground. But somehow I understood it. "The forest remembers," it said. "You were a logger. You killed the old ones." The truth hit me like a falling tree. This wasn't about these hikers or my fellow rangers. This was about revenge. The forest, or whatever, controlled it, was paying back everyone who had ever harmed it. The creature took a step toward me. The ground cracked under its foot and new plants grew from the cracks instantly. The other rangers were already being pulled into trees, their screams getting muffled as bark grew over their faces. I had to think fast. The old stories, the warnings, there had to be something useful in them. Mrs. Redfeather had said something about sacred fire, about the tribe using it to keep the forest spirit in check. I had matches in my gear, and my notebook was full of dry paper. But would regular fire work against something like this? The creature was almost on top of me now. Branches reached for my throat. I had to make a choice, try to fight, or let the forest take me like all the others. That's when I remembered one more thing Mrs. Redfeather had told me. The old spirits must be respected, but they must also follow the old laws, challenge their right to judge, and they must prove themselves worthy. I stood up straight and looked right into the creature's leaf-covered face. "I challenge you," I said, hoping I wasn't about to make the biggest mistake of my life. By the old laws, everything stopped. Even the fog seemed to freeze. The creature tilted its head, and I swear, even though it didn't have a real face, I could feel it smile. "Challenge accepted," it whispered in its terrible tree voice. The real test was about to begin. The moment I made the challenge, everything changed. The wooden cage of trees melted back into the ground. My trapped fellow rangers were released, falling to the ground, gasping but alive. Even the fog pulled back a little, forming a perfect circle around us. "The challenge is simple," the creature said, its voice like rustling leaves. "Find the heart tree before sunrise. Free those I have taken. Stop me. Fail. And everything here becomes part of the forest, forever." It raised its wooden arms, and the world went crazy. The ground rolled like waves in the ocean. Trees shot up and sank back down like they were breathing. The paths twisted and changed like living snakes. In seconds, I didn't recognize anything anymore. This was my forest, the place I'd known for 25 years, but now it was like being lost in a nightmare. "David," Tommy called out. He was trying to help Sarah Chen, who was still half stuck in her tree. "What do we do?" I looked at my watch. It was working again. We had 4 hours until sunrise. "Split up," I said, even though every horror movie I'd ever seen told me this was a bad idea. "Tommy, you and the others get Sarah and anyone else you can free. I'm going to find the heart tree." "How will you find it?" Sarah asked weakly, leaning on Tommy's shoulder. I pulled out my old logger's compass, the one I'd kept all these years as a reminder of my past mistakes. "Because I think I know what it is. The oldest tree in the forest, the one I couldn't bring myself to cut down 20 years ago." The creature's laugh echoed through the trees. Suddenly, the fog turned into a maze of walls and paths. My fellow rangers disappeared behind one wall while I faced another path. The real nightmare began. Every step was a new horror. The ground under my feet felt soft, like walking on flesh instead of dirt. The trees weren't just moving anymore, they were changing. Some had faces growing out of their bark, mouths opening and closing silently. Others had hands reaching out, trying to grab me. The fog played tricks too. Sometimes I'd see shapes in it, people running, creatures crawling, things that shouldn't exist. Voices called out constantly, some begging for help, others warning me to turn back. My compass spun wildly, but sometimes it would stop and point in a specific direction. Each time it did, I saw a marking on a tree. The same tribal symbols I'd seen earlier. They were showing me the way. The deeper I went, the worse things got. The air felt thick, like breathing soup. Time played tricks too. Sometimes I'd watch my watch go forward an hour in what felt like seconds. Other times a minute would seem to last forever. I found more people trapped in trees. Some were fresh, like Sarah had been. Others looked like they'd been there for years, decades even. Their eyes followed me as I passed. Some tried to speak, but only rustling leaves came out of their mouths. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. My own face, pressed against the bark of a huge redwood, eyes wide with terror. "That's your future," the creature's voice whispered, from everywhere. "Give up now. Join the forest willingly. It hurts less that way." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered Mrs. Redfeather's words. "Fear is how it tricks you. Fear is how it wins." Opening my eyes, I looked at my watch again. 1 hour left until sunrise. The compass suddenly stopped spinning and pointed straight ahead. Through the fog, I saw it. The heart tree. The oldest redwood in the forest, over 300 feet tall and wider than a car. The one tree I couldn't bring myself to cut down all those years ago, but something was different about it now. The bark was covered in glowing symbols, and at its base was what looked like a door made of twisted roots and branches. The creature appeared beside the tree, its wooden body creaking as it moved. "You found it," it said. "But can you stop me?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old lighter, the same one I'd used to burn my logging permit when I quit 20 years ago. "You're not the forest," I said. "The real forest forgives. The real forest heals. You're just using it like we did." "I am the forest," it roared, its body growing larger, branches spreading like wings. "No," I said quietly. "You're just another thing hurting it." That's when I saw them. Tiny sprouts breaking through the ground around the heart tree. New life, growing despite all the darkness and horror. The forest was still alive, still fighting, still growing. I knew what I had to do, but the cost would be high. The creature lunged at me, its wooden claws extending. Behind me, I heard Tommy and the others shouting, trying to find me in the fog. The sun was about to rise. Time for the final move. Sometimes the hardest choices are also the simplest. As the creature charged at me, I didn't run. Instead, I stepped forward and pressed my hand against the heart tree's bark. "I'm sorry," I whispered, both to the tree and to myself. Then I flicked the lighter. The creature screamed, "No!" But it was too late. The tiny flame touched the ancient symbols carved into the tree's bark. They caught fire instantly, burning with a strange blue light that spread faster than any normal fire should. The creature stumbled back, its wooden body creaking and splitting. "What have you done?" "The only thing I could," I said. "Sometimes, to save a forest, you have to let part of it burn. Every ranger knows that." The blue fire raced up the heart tree's trunk following the pattern of symbols. As it burned, something amazing happened. Every person trapped in the surrounding trees began to fall free, like they were being pushed out of melting ice. The creature thrashed and roared. Parts of its body were falling apart now, turning back into regular branches and leaves. But it wasn't done yet. It swung one massive arm at me, and I felt wooden claws tear into my shoulder. That's when Tommy and the others burst through the fog. They were carrying makeshift torches made from branches and ranger gear, each one burning with that same strange blue fire. "The tribal symbols," Sarah Chen shouted, her voice hoarse but strong. "They're on every major tree. Light them all." The creature tried to stop them, but it was growing weaker. Every blue flame that caught made it smaller, more fragile. Its movements became jerky, like a puppet with cut strings. "You can't," it growled, its voice barely understandable now. "I protect the forest." "No," I said, standing straight despite my injured shoulder. "You trap it, like those loggers trapped you all those years ago." Because I finally understood. This thing wasn't a forest spirit, it was something else. A logger maybe, or several loggers who'd been trapped here in 1937. Their fear and anger had twisted them, turned them into something that thought hurting people would protect the trees. The sun was rising now. As the first rays broke through the trees, they lit up all the burning symbols. The creature let out one final scream, but this time it sounded almost human. Then it collapsed, falling apart into regular branches, leaves, and moss. The fog lifted. The twisted trees straightened, and all around us, people who had been trapped were helping each other stand. But we'd paid a price. The heart tree, that ancient giant I'd saved once before, was gone. In its place was a circle of ash, and in the center a small bright green sprout pushing up through the soil. My shoulder hurt where the creature had clawed me, and the scars would never fully heal. Sometimes, especially when it's about to rain, the marks tingle and I swear I can feel the forest's pulse through them. We found all the missing people, not just the recent ones, but dozens from over the years. Most recovered fully, though some, like Sarah, still have dreams about being part of the trees. Nobody outside the park believed our story, of course. We filed it as a mass rescue from severe weather conditions. The forest is different now. Not in a bad way, just different. The trees grow normally again, but they seem more alive somehow. Birds and animals returned, and the paths stay where they're supposed to be. The tribal symbols remain, but they don't glow anymore. They're just a reminder. I still work as a ranger here. Every morning I visit that circle where the heart tree stood. The sprout there is growing fast, not supernaturally fast, just healthy and strong. Sometimes I talk to it, telling it about the forest and how things are changing. Last week, Mrs. Redfeather visited the spot. She smiled at the young tree and said something I'll never forget. The forest remembers, but now it remembers kindness, too. Tommy and Sarah both stayed on as rangers. We never talk about what happened, but sometimes, when the fog gets thick, we patrol together, just in case. I've learned that there's a difference between protecting something and trapping it. The forest doesn't need monsters to guard it. It needs people who understand it, who respect it, and who are willing to let it grow and change in its own way. As for my scars, well, every now and then when I'm alone on patrol, I swear I can hear the trees whispering. Not in a scary way anymore, but like old friends sharing secrets. And sometimes, just sometimes, I whisper back, because that's what you do in a forest. You listen, you learn, and you remember that every end can also be a beginning, like that tiny sprout in the ash circle, growing stronger every day. I never wanted to tell this story. Some nights I still wake up in cold sweat hearing those sounds echo in my head, sounds no human should ever hear. But people need to know what happened on Mount Rainier last summer. They need to know why my rescue team never came back. My name is Thomas Henderson. I've been a park ranger at Mount Rainier for 25 years, and until last year, I thought I knew every inch of this mountain. I've saved countless lives here, guided thousands of visitors, and even lost my brother Jack to these slopes 15 years ago. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered in those ancient caves. It started with the tremors. Small ones at first, barely noticeable unless you knew the mountain like I did. But something felt wrong about them. In all my years here, I'd never felt the ground shake quite like this. It was almost like the mountain itself was trying to wake up. Then came the landslides. Not your usual spring melt stuff, but massive chunks of the mountain face just giving way. The weird part? They always happened at night when the temperature was steady. No rain, no snow melt, no obvious trigger, just collapse. I remember the morning I found the first footprint. I was checking out a fresh slide area near Paradise Point when I saw it, pressed deep into the mud, bigger than any bear track I'd ever seen. My first thought was someone was playing a prank, but the shape was all wrong. The toes were too long, the arch too defined. And it was huge. My whole rain boot could fit inside it with room to spare. But what really got me was the pattern. These weren't random tracks. They formed perfect circles around certain areas of the mountain, always leading to and from the newly exposed cave openings. And inside those caves, well, that's where things got really strange. The first cave I entered was different from our usual mountain hollows. The walls were smooth, almost polished in places, and the artwork, crude but deliberate drawings covered the walls. Not like the usual graffiti we sometimes find, these were old, really old. They showed massive figures, twice the size of the humans drawn beside them, with strange swirling patterns around their heads. That afternoon, my radio started picking up weird interference. Static at first, then something else. A low humming that seemed to pulse in time with my headache. I'd been getting those a lot lately ever since the tremors started. But this was different. It felt like something was pressing against my mind, trying to get in. I was about to call it a day when I saw it, a shadow moving deeper in the cave. Not the usual play of flashlight beams, but something huge and deliberate. And those eyes, I'll never forget those eyes. Intelligent, ancient, and definitely not human. I've been on this mountain long enough to know when it's trying to tell me something. And right then, every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But I couldn't. Not with climbers still up there, not with whatever this was becoming more active by the day, and not with the memory of Jack, who disappeared on this very mountain, never far from my thoughts. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The mountain had been keeping secrets for thousands of years, and something up there had decided it was time for those secrets to come out. I couldn't sleep that night. Those eyes from the cave kept appearing in my mind. I knew I had to learn more, but I had to be smart about it. 25 years of mountain rescue had taught me that rushing in unprepared was the fastest way to get yourself killed. The next morning, I started digging through old park records. What I found gave me chills. Every 10 years or so, climbers would disappear from the exact same area where I'd found the cave. Not just getting lost or falling, they'd vanish without a trace. No equipment found, no bodies recovered. Nothing. My brother Jack had disappeared in that same spot. I called my old friend Billy Whitecloud, one of the tribal elders who'd lived near the mountain his whole life. When I mentioned the cave and the drawings, he went quiet for a long time. "Thomas," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "Our people have stories about that place. Stories we don't tell tourists. The mountain has guardians, ancient ones. They've been there since before our ancestors first came to these lands. They don't like being disturbed." "What kind of guardians?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Big people," he said. "Powerful people. They can move earth and stone. They can speak without words. They can make you see things that aren't there, or hide things that are. My grandfather used to say, they're not evil, but they're not kind either. They protect something up there, something important." I thanked Billy and went back to the cave entrance. This time I brought better equipment. My best flashlight, a camera, extra batteries, and my emergency radio. The weird static was still there, but now it had a pattern to it, almost like a heartbeat. Inside the cave, I found more drawings. They showed the big figures doing impossible things, lifting mountains, controlling storms, speaking to animals. But it was the newer markings that really got my attention. Someone, or something, had been adding to the old drawings. Fresh. Marks showed modern things. Helicopters, cars, buildings. These weren't thousand-year-old drawings. Some of them were made recently. My head started pounding again, worse than before. The air felt heavy, like right before a big storm. My flashlight beam caught something reflecting in the darkness. Not rock, not water, but something smooth and carved. It looked like steps leading down, way down into the mountain. That's when I heard it. A sound that shouldn't exist in a cave, like lots of feet walking but not quite hitting the ground, and voices but not speaking any language I'd ever heard. They seemed to come from inside my head as much as from the darkness ahead. I clicked off my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall. The sounds got closer. Through the darkness I could see them moving. Huge shapes, at least 3 of them, with strange patterns glowing faintly on their skin. They hadn't seen me yet, but they were heading my way. My radio crackled to life on its own. Through the odd static, I heard words that made my blood run cold. The Seeker returns, like his brother before. They knew about Jack. They knew about me. And now I knew too much to walk away. I had to make a choice right then. Run and never come back, or stay and finally learn the truth about what happened to my brother. But as I stood there in the dark, heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it, I realized something terrifying. Maybe they weren't giving me a choice at all. I held my breath as the huge shapes came closer. My legs were shaking, but I stayed perfectly still. The creatures passed by so close I could smell them, like wet earth after rain, and something else. Something old, like the deep parts of caves where people never go. Then one of them stopped. Just stopped. Right in front of my hiding spot. It turned its head slowly and I saw those eyes again. They glowed slightly in the dark, not like animal eyes reflecting light, but with their own soft blue light. The face around those eyes was almost human, but not quite. The forehead was larger, the jaw stronger, and there were marks on the skin that seemed to shift and move in the darkness. Thomas Henderson. The words appeared in my mind without going through my ears. You seek answers about your brother. My mouth went dry. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Yes, I whispered. What happened to Jack? The creature, It had to be one of the Bigfoot clan Billy had warned me about. Tilted its head. It was so tall I had to look up, way up to see its face. He found what he should not have found, as you are finding now. The other two beings turned back. They were just as tall, but looked different. One had markings that swirled like storm clouds. The other had patterns like mountain ridges. They carried simple tools, wooden staffs wrapped with strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly. "Show him," the first one said, still in my mind. "Show him why we protect." The air around us started to feel strange, like before lightning strikes. My headache got worse, but then something else happened. Images started flowing into my mind. I saw the mountain, but not like it is now. I saw it thousands of years ago. I saw the caves, but they were different. They were a city, a huge underground city full of these beings. They were doing impossible things, moving rocks with their minds, talking to each other without words, controlling the weather. But they showed me something else too, something deep under the mountain, something they were protecting, something that made my skin crawl just getting a glimpse of it. "This is what must stay hidden," they told me. "This is why we remain. This is why some who find us cannot leave." Did you kill Jack?" I managed to ask. The one with storm cloud markings stepped forward. "Your brother lives, Thomas Henderson. He understood what was at stake. He chose to stay, to help us protect." My legs almost gave out. "Jack was alive? Here? I want to see him," I said. "You will," said the first one. "But first you must understand, must choose," as he did. The ground under my feet started to tremble. Not like the earlier tremors, this was different. The walls around us began to glow with those same shifting patterns I saw on their skin. The air got heavier and I felt pressure building in my head. "Come," they said together in my mind, "see the truth, then decide." They started walking deeper into the cave, clearly expecting me to follow. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to turn around, to run back to daylight and safety. But Jack was alive. My brother was alive. I clicked my flashlight, back on, and took a step forward. Then another. The beam showed more steps leading down into the heart of the mountain. As I followed these enormous beings into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever choice they were talking about, it would be bigger than just me and Jack. The deeper we went, the more the walls glowed. And that's when I started hearing the whispers. Hundreds of voices all talking at once, some in languages I knew, others I didn't. Among them, far away but getting closer, I thought I heard a familiar voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. "Jack?" I called out. "Jack, is that you?" The answer came not in words, but in a feeling of such powerful warning that it almost knocked me off my feet. Something was very wrong. These beings weren't just showing me their home. They were testing me. And I had a terrible feeling that failing their test would mean a lot worse than just getting lost in a cave. Everything changed after that first meeting. I radioed back to base camp about finding some unusual cave formations that needed investigation. They sent a small team to help. Sarah, our best climber, Mike, our geologist, and Dr. Chen, who studied the park's wildlife. I didn't tell them what I'd really found. Who would have believed me? But the Bigfoot clan knew they were coming. And they weren't happy about it. It started with small things. Our equipment kept failing. Batteries that were full in the morning were dead by noon. Compasses spun in circles. Our phones showed 5 different times, none of them right. Maps of the area didn't match what we were seeing. Paths that should have been straight now curved, in impossible ways. Then the weather turned against us. The sky was clear when we started climbing, but clouds appeared from nowhere. Not normal clouds. These were dark and moved in unnatural ways, swirling in tight circles right above our heads. The temperature dropped so fast our water bottles froze solid in minutes. "We should turn back," Sarah said, hugging herself against the sudden cold. "This isn't natural." She was right, but I couldn't leave, not when I was so close to finding Jack. That's when the voices started for everyone else too. At first, they thought it was just the wind. But wind doesn't whisper your name. Wind doesn't tell you secrets about your past that nobody else could know. Mike was the first to crack. We found him staring at a cave wall, talking to someone who wasn't there. "They're showing me things," he kept saying. "Things under the mountain. Things that should stay buried." Dr. Chen started writing in her notebook like crazy. When I looked over her shoulder, I saw the same swirling patterns that marked the Bigfoot clan's skin. She didn't even remember drawing them. Then Sarah screamed. She was pointing at a huge shadow moving across the snow, but when we looked, nothing was there. The shadow kept moving anyway. My radio crackled to life. "Thomas Henderson, you bring others." This was not our agreement. "We didn't have an agreement," I said back. "I just want to find my brother." The response came as a deep rumble in the ground. Cracks appeared in the snow around us. Not random cracks. They formed those. Same swirling patterns getting bigger, spreading out like a giant web. "Your brother chose," the voice in my head said. "These others have not. They cannot stay. They cannot know." "Then let them go," I pleaded. "Let them leave safely. I'll stay." The laugh that filled my mind was like rocks falling down a mountain. "They have seen too much. Now they must choose too, or the mountain will choose for them." The ground shook harder. Snow started sliding down the slopes around us. The weird clouds got darker, spinning faster, dropping so low we could almost touch them. Mike grabbed my arm. His eyes were wide with fear. "Tom, look." All around us, the snow was melting in big circles, and in each circle, a huge footprint appeared. We were surrounded. Dr. Chen's notebook fell from her shaking hands. The pages were covered in drawings now, not just patterns but faces, huge faces with glowing eyes, the same faces that were now appearing in the shadows all around us. "The time for watching is over," the voice said. "Now you will all come below. Now you will all see. Now you will all choose." Sarah tried to run. She made it 3 steps before the ground opened under her feet. She would have fallen if Mike hadn't caught her arm. The hole wasn't natural. It was a tunnel, with smooth sides and those glowing patterns leading straight down into darkness. More tunnels opened around us. The wind pushed at our backs, driving us toward them. The shadows with the glowing eyes got closer. "Tom?" Dr. Chen's voice shook. "What's happening?" I knew exactly what was happening. The Bigfoot clan wasn't just inviting us in anymore. They were making us come in. We had no choice but to go down into the tunnels. The wind was too strong, the cold too bitter, and those huge shadows were everywhere now. Our flashlights showed smooth stone walls that seemed to go down forever. "Stay close," I told the others. "Whatever happens, we stick together." But the tunnel had other plans. At the first intersection, the ground shifted like a living thing. Before we could react, stone walls shot up from the floor, splitting us apart. I could hear the others shouting, but their voices sounded far away. "Tom, help!" Sarah's voice echoed from somewhere to my left. "Everyone stay calm," I shouted back. "Save your batteries, count your supplies." I checked my own backpack with shaking hands. 2 energy bars, half a bottle of water, some rope, and my now useless radio. The batteries in my flashlight were getting weaker by the minute. That's when the whispers started again, but different this time. They weren't just in my head anymore. They bounced off the walls, coming from every direction. "Choose," they said. "Choose like your brother chose." "What choice?" I yelled. "What did you make Jack choose?" Instead of answering, they showed me. Images flooded my mind. Jack, 15 years younger, standing in these same tunnels. He was seeing something so amazing it made him cry, but also something so terrible it made him want to run. They were showing him their secret, the thing they protected deep under the mountain. "Tom?" Mike's voice broke through, sounding scared. "Are you seeing this too? These visions?" "Yeah," I called back. "Don't fight them. I think they're trying to show us why they're here." More images came. The Bigfoot clan, living here for thousands of years, protecting something that could change the world or destroy it. I saw Jack understanding this. Saw him decide to stay to help them keep the secret. Dr. Chen's scream echoed through the tunnels. "There's something moving in here with me." "Chen, listen to me," I shouted. "They're not trying to hurt us, they're testing us." But I wasn't so sure about that anymore. The air was getting thinner. The tunnel walls were closing in just an inch at a time, but definitely closing. Our lights were getting dimmer, and it was getting colder. So cold our breath turned to ice on the walls. "Need to make a decision?" Sarah's voice shook. "Before we freeze, or suffocate." She was right. They were forcing us to choose, just like they'd forced Jack. Stay and help them protect whatever was down here, or... I didn't want to think about the or. The ground rumbled again. In the dying light of my flashlight, I saw those patterns on the walls start to glow brighter. The whispers got louder, turning into a chant that shook dust from the ceiling. "Time grows short," the voices said. "The mountain's heart is restless. Choose now." "What happens if we say no?" Mike asked. The answer came as a deep crack that split the floor by my feet. Hot air rushed up from below, carrying a smell that made my stomach turn. From somewhere deep below, I heard a sound that shouldn't exist, like something massive was waking up. That's when I heard another voice, one I recognized, one I'd been hoping to hear for 15 years. "Tom," Jack's voice. "Little brother, can you hear me?" "Jack." I pressed against the cold stone wall. "Jack, where are you?" "Making your choice harder," he said. "I'm sorry, but you need to understand what's at stake. All of you do. It's bigger than us. Bigger than everything." The walls rumbled again. A new tunnel opened up ahead of me, glowing with those strange patterns. The other three must have seen the same thing because I heard their surprised shouts. "Follow the lights," Jack said. "I'll meet you there. Then you'll understand. Then you'll have to choose." My flashlight flickered one last time and died, but I didn't need it anymore. The glowing patterns were bright enough to light the way. They seemed to pulse like heartbeats leading deeper into the mountain. Whatever was down there, whatever Jack and the Bigfoot clan had been protecting all these years, we were about to find out. And then, like Jack said, we'd have to choose. I took a deep breath of the thin, cold air and started walking. The tunnel floor sloped down sharply, taking me closer to that massive sound below. With each step, the temperature dropped, and the whispers grew louder. We were heading for the heart of the mountain, and something in that heart was waiting for us. The glowing tunnel led us to a huge cave. The ceiling was so high our lights couldn't reach it. The walls sparkled with crystals I'd never seen before. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Jack. My brother looked exactly the same as he had 15 years ago, like he hadn't aged a day. The only difference was the strange, swirling patterns on his skin. Just like the Bigfoot clan. "Tom," he smiled sadly. "I'm sorry it had to be like this." Sarah, Mike, and Dr. Chen emerged from other tunnels. We all stood there, staring at Jack and the enormous shapes of the Bigfoot clan gathering behind him. "Jack," I whispered, "what's going on? What are they protecting down here?" He pointed to the far end of the cave. The crystal-covered walls parted, like curtains revealing something that made my heart stop. It looked like a doorway, but not one made by humans. It was perfectly round and filled with swirling lights that hurt my eyes to look at. The air around it felt wrong, like it was bending in ways it shouldn't. "It's a gateway," Jack explained, "to somewhere else, somewhere that should never connect with our world. The clan has guarded it for thousands of years, making sure nothing comes through, making sure nobody finds it. But something's changing." The largest of the clan spoke in our minds. "The gateway grows stronger. We need more guardians." The ground under our feet started to shake. The lights in the gateway swirled faster. "Every 10 years, Jack said, the gateway pulses stronger. Sometimes people find their way down here during those times. Like I did. Like you just did. Then they have to choose. Become a guardian, or..." A horrible screech came from the gateway. Through the swirling lights, I saw shapes moving. Wrong shapes. Impossible shapes. "It's getting worse," Jack said. "Climate change, earthquakes, human activity on the mountain. It's all making the gateway more unstable." We need help. We need you. All of you, the clan leader added. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. The patterns in my notebook, they were from that, weren't they? The gateway was calling us. Mike shook his head. This is crazy. We can't just disappear like you did, Jack. We have families. If the gateway isn't guarded, Jack said quietly, there won't be any families to go back to. The screeching got louder. The ground shook harder. Cracks appeared in the floor, spreading from the gateway like spider webs. Choose now, the clan leader commanded. Become guardians or we wipe your memories and send you back, but know this. If you leave, we may not be strong enough to hold it much longer. I looked at Jack, really looked at him. Behind the patterns, on his skin, I saw the same big brother who'd taught me to climb, who'd always protected me. He'd stayed to protect everyone. Sarah grabbed my hand. Tom, I think we have to. Before I could answer, a blinding light burst from the gateway. The air filled with a sound like 1,000 voices screaming at once. Through the chaos, I saw shapes starting to push through. Dark things with too many edges. Choose, Jack shouted over the noise. Now! Dr. Chen moved first, running to stand beside Jack, then Mike. Sarah squeezed my hand one last time and joined them. I looked at the gateway, at the darkness trying to break through into our world. I thought about all the hikers on the mountain above us, all the families in the towns below. None of them knew how close they were to something terrible. None of them knew they were safe because of my brother, and the clan, and their endless watch. I made my choice. Epilogue. The official report says we got lost in a storm. The search teams found signs of a massive landslide, but no bodies. They called off the search after 2 weeks. Sometimes on clear nights, hikers on Mount Rainier see strange lights near the summit. Sometimes they hear whispers on the wind, or see huge shadows moving through the trees. But they're safe. We make sure of that. The patterns on my skin glow a little brighter each year. The gateway pulses in its chamber, but we hold it back. All of us, the clan, Jack, my friends, and me. We guard the door between worlds. And if you're ever hiking on Mount Rainier and feel eyes watching you from the shadows, don't be afraid. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to protect you. Just do us a favor. Don't dig too deep into the mountain's secrets. Some mysteries need to stay buried. The night I lost my arm, the moon was the color of blood. But I should start from the beginning. My name is Robert Miller, and I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 12 years now. Most people think being a ranger means giving tours and telling kids not to feed the squirrels. If only they knew what really happens in these woods when darkness falls. It all started 3 months ago, on a cold September morning. The fog was thick as soup that day, the kind that turns trees into monsters and makes you doubt your own eyes. I was doing my usual morning patrol, checking on some reports of missing sheep from the farms near the park border. Nothing unusual about that. We get wild animal attacks all the time. But something felt different. Wrong. I've spent enough time in these forests to know when things aren't right. 20 years fighting forest fires before becoming a ranger taught me that. The scars on my face remind me every morning in the mirror. I was the only one who made it out of the big blaze of 15. When you've danced with death like that, you develop a sixth sense for danger. The birds weren't singing that morning. The forest was dead quiet except for the soft drip of moisture from the trees. Even the usual morning fog felt different, thicker, almost alive. It seemed to curl around my boots as I walked, like it was trying to grab me. I adjusted the hunting, rifle on my shoulder, standard equipment for rangers out here, though I rarely needed it. The weight of my survival pack felt reassuring against my back. Years of experience had taught me never to venture into these woods without proper gear. That's when I found the first set of tracks. I've tracked every animal in these parts, bears, cougars, wolves, you name it. But these prints, they were wolf tracks, but wrong. Too big. Way too big. And there was something else that made my skin crawl. Some of them looked almost human. I crouched down to examine them closer. my fingers tracing the outline in the mud. The print was fresh, maybe a few hours old. Whatever made it was massive. The paw print was bigger than my spread hand. But what really got me was how it changed. The track started as wolf prints, then gradually shifted like the animal had transformed as it walked. I shook my head, trying to clear it. 20 years of forest firefighting and 12 years as a ranger, and I'd never seen anything like this. I took out my phone to photograph the tracks, but the fog was so thick the pictures came out gray and useless. That's when I heard it. A howl that made my blood freeze. It wasn't the normal call of a wolf. This sound was deeper, almost human-like, as if someone had mixed a wolf's howl with a man's scream. It echoed through the trees, bouncing off the mountains until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. My hand tightened on my rifle. The rational part of my brain tried to explain it away. Weird acoustics from the fog, maybe a wolf with an injured throat. But deep down, in that primitive part of our brains that remembers when humans weren't at the top of the food chain, I knew something was out there in the fog, something that shouldn't exist. I didn't know it then, but that morning was the beginning of a nightmare that would cost me my arm, 3 of my fellow rangers their lives, and change everything I thought I knew about the world. The old tribal elders had tried to warn us about the blood moon, about the ancient spirits that walk these lands. We should have listened. But like I said, that was just the beginning. And out here in Olympic National Park, when the fog rolls, and the moon turns red, beginnings have a way of turning into endings real fast. The reports started coming in that same week. First, it was Mike Henderson's farm. 12 sheep killed in one night. I drove out to check the scene the next morning, and what I found didn't make sense. Normal wolves kill 1 or 2 sheep and eat them. These sheep were just torn apart, like something was angry, like it wasn't about food at all. Never seen anything like it, Mike told me, his hands shaking as he poured coffee into my cup. We sat at his kitchen table while his border collie whimpered under a chair. That dog usually never shuts up. Now it wouldn't even go near the windows. Heard the weirdest sounds last night too, Robert. Not normal wolf howls. Sounded almost like they were talking to each other. I nodded, remembering that strange howl I'd heard in the fog. Did you see anything? Mike's face went pale. Just shapes in the fog, big ones, standing up like men, but not men. He looked down at his coffee. You probably think I'm crazy. I didn't. I'd been a ranger too long to ignore when multiple people started telling the same strange story. The next day, Carol from the gas station reported seeing what she thought was a man walking through her backyard at night. Except when it passed, under her security light it was way too tall, maybe 7 feet, and covered in dark fur. The security camera footage was blurry, but something big definitely walked through that yard on 2 legs. Then the phones at the ranger station started, ringing nonstop. Hikers reporting weird howls, campers finding massive footprints around their tents, local kids saying they saw red eyes watching them from the trees at the school bus stop. Sarah Running Deer, one of the tribal elders, came to see me at the station. Her face was serious as she spread out an old leather map on my desk. The blood moon is coming, she said quietly. The old stories warn us about this time. When the moon turns red, they return, the ones who walk like wolves but think like men. I wanted to dismiss it as just stories, but the evidence was piling up on my desk. Too many photos of strange tracks, too many reports of things that shouldn't exist, too many dead animals found, torn apart for no reason. The other rangers started noticing it too. The regular wolves in the park were acting strange, moving in larger packs, avoiding their usual hunting grounds. Birds were leaving the area weeks before migration season. Even the elk herds were pushing south, away from their normal grazing spots. It was like every animal in Olympic National Park knew something bad was coming. The fog got thicker each day, hanging around even when the weather report said it should be clear. Our radio started acting up, filling with static at random times. Cell phone signals got spotty. It was like something was slowly cutting us off from the outside world. Then came the night of the first cabin attack. I was working late at the station when the call came in. Jack Wheeler's hunting cabin had been destroyed, not just broken into, but literally torn apart. The roof was ripped off. Claw marks deeper than bear claws scraped the walls. And the tracks around the cabin, some were wolf prints, some were human-like, and some were something in between. Thankfully, Jack wasn't there when it happened, but he'd left his trail camera running. When I checked the footage, my hands went cold. The video showed only darkness and fog, but the audio caught sounds I'll never forget. Howls that turned into words. Deep, rumbling voices speaking in a language I didn't understand. And underneath it all, the sound of many, many feet moving through the forest. That night, I cleaned my rifle and packed extra ammunition in my truck. I called the other rangers and told them to do the same. The moon was starting to look a little redder each night, and somehow I knew, we all knew, that these attacks were just the beginning. Whatever was out there in the fog, it was getting bolder, getting closer, testing us. And soon, very soon, it would do more than just test. I spent the next few days digging through old files at the ranger station, trying to make sense of what was happening. That's when I found something interesting. Every 30 years, like clockwork, there were reports of strange wolf activity in Olympic National Park. And each time, it happened during a blood moon. I needed to know more, so I drove out to visit. Sarah running deer again. Her small house sat at the edge of the reservation, surrounded by wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze. As I pulled up, I noticed she was already waiting for me on her porch. "I knew you would come," she said, pouring me a cup of hot tea. "You've seen them now, haven't you?" I nodded, warming my hands on the cup. The tracks, the attacks, the weird howls. "Sarah, what's really going on here?" She disappeared inside and came back with a wooden box. Inside were old photographs, yellow, with age. They showed cave walls covered in paintings of wolf-like creatures standing up like men. "My grandfather took these in 1938, she said, during the last blood moon. He was the only survivor of his hunting group." She paused, looking out at the foggy forest. "They're called the Dogmen by our people. They've been here longer than us, longer than the trees. They sleep for 30 years, then wake when the moon turns red." I spread the photos out on her table. The cave paintings showed the same things happening over and over. Normal wolves being controlled by the larger wolf creatures, people hiding in buildings, the red moon hanging over it all. "There's more," Sarah said. "The caves are still there, deep in the park. But be careful. They know when people are getting close to the truth." The next morning, I took 2 other rangers, Tom and Lisa, to search for the caves. The fog was so thick we had to stay within arm's reach of each other. Our flashlight beams looked weak in the white mist, like the fog was eating the light. We found the first cave around noon. The entrance was half hidden behind a fallen tree, and if Sarah hadn't shown me the photos, we would have walked right past it. As we got closer, the air got colder and our radios started crackling with static. "I don't like this, Rob," Lisa whispered, her hand on her rifle. "Something feels wrong." She was right. The cave mouth seemed to breathe, gentle puffs of air carrying a musty, wild smell. Our boots crunched on old animal bones as we entered. The beam of my flashlight showed claw marks on the walls, fresh ones. Then we saw the paintings. They covered the walls from floor to ceiling, telling a story in red and black paint. They showed the dogmen teaching normal wolves to hunt, leading them like a general leads an army. Other paintings showed them appearing and disappearing in fog, just like the stories we'd been hearing. But it was the last painting that made my skin crawl. It showed the dogmen gathering under a red moon surrounded by mist, slowly changing from wolf to something that walked like a man. Tom's flashlight beam caught something on the ground. "Rob, look at this." It was a park ranger's badge, old and rusted. The date on it was 1938, the same year Sarah's grandfather survived his encounter. Next to it lay an old rifle, its barrel bent like it was made of rubber. Suddenly our radios exploded with noise. Not static this time, but howls. The same deep, almost human howls I'd been hearing in my nightmares. And they were close. "We need to go," I said, grabbing the badge. Now, we ran. The fog outside had gotten thicker, if that was possible. We could barely see 10 feet ahead. And somewhere in that fog, things were moving. Dark shapes ducked in and out of the trees. Red eyes blinked open and closed in the mist. We made it back to our truck, but the message was clear. We weren't welcome here. The dogmen knew we'd found their lair, and they weren't happy about it. That night, I spread everything we'd learned on my desk. The 30-year pattern, the cave paintings, the old badge. It was all connected. The dogmen weren't just stories. They were real. They were waking up, and they were getting ready for something big. I checked the calendar and felt my stomach drop. The full blood moon was just 3 days away. We weren't ready. How could anyone be ready for something like this? But as I looked at the old badge, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let what happened in 1938 happen again. This time, we'd be prepared. I didn't know then how wrong I was, or how high the price would be, for learning the truth about what really lives in these woods, because the dogmen had been watching us too, learning about us, and they had plans of their own. The next 2 days were like watching a storm roll in, knowing you can't stop it. The attacks got worse, much worse. First, they hit the Johnson farm. Not just their sheep this time. They tore apart the barn while the family huddled in their basement, listening to those horrible howls. When I got there the next morning, I found something new. Claw marks 8 feet up the walls. They wanted us to know they could reach high, that doors and windows wouldn't keep them out. Then our radio stopped working completely. Not just static now. Dead silence. Cell phones, too. It was like someone had thrown a blanket over the whole park. The fog got so thick we could barely see the road while driving, and it never went away, not even at noon. I called an emergency meeting at the main ranger station. 4 of us were there. Me, Tom, Lisa, and Mike Chen, our newest ranger. We spread out maps on the table, marking all the attack sites with red pins. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing at the pattern. "They're attacking in a circle, moving closer to the station each time." She was right. They were testing our defenses, learning our response times, like wolves hunting elk. Except this time, we were the prey. That's when Mike looked out the window and went pale. "Guys!" Dozens of regular wolves stood at the tree line just watching us. They didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stared. Their eyes glowed red in the fog, the same red as the moon that was getting fuller and redder each night. "They're being controlled," Tom whispered. "Just like in the cave paintings. I'd never seen anything like it. Wolves don't act this way. They don't stand still like soldiers waiting for orders. But these wolves were different now, changed. The pack stayed there all day, watching. When night fell, they started howling, but not normal wolf howls. They were repeating the deep, wrong sounds we'd heard in the cave, like they were learning to speak. None of us slept that night. How could we? The howls got closer and closer, and sometimes we heard what sounded like words mixed in with them. Ancient words that made our heads hurt just listening. The next morning, Tom went to check on the entrance station. He never came back. We found his truck 2 hours later, flipped over on the road. The metal was torn open like paper. There were claw marks everywhere and tracks in the mud. Wolf tracks, human tracks, and those horrible in-between prints that gave me nightmares. But no Tom. "They're picking us off," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "Cutting us off from help and picking us off one by one." She was right, and tomorrow night was the full blood moon. We grabbed everything we could think of to defend ourselves. Rifles, flares, extra ammunition. I remembered the old tribal stories Sarah had told me and grabbed some sage bundles and blessed items from her too, though I didn't know if they'd help. Mike wanted to leave, to run for it. I couldn't blame him, but Lisa and I knew better. The dogmen were watching all the roads now. Nobody was getting out until this was over. We barricaded ourselves in the main ranger station. It was the strongest building we had, with thick walls and metal doors. We set up floodlights all around it, pointing out into the fog. Not that they helped much. The fog just turned the beams into weird, glowing shapes. As the sun set, we heard it, a howl deeper than all the others. It shook the windows and made our teeth hurt. The answer came from all around us. Hundreds of howls, some wolf, some almost human, all calling back to that leader. Through the fog, we saw them gathering, red eyes floating in the mist, some low to the ground like normal wolves, others 7 or 8 feet high, dark shapes moving in ways that nothing should move, halfway between wolf and human and something else entirely. The blood moon was rising, and the dogmen were done playing games. "What do they want?" Mike asked, his hands shaking as he loaded his rifle. I looked out at those glowing red eyes in the fog and finally understood. They want their territory back, and tomorrow night they're going to try to take it. I didn't say what we were all thinking, that we probably wouldn't survive to see the sunrise after that blood moon. The dogmen had been planning this for 30 years, and we had less than 24 hours to figure out how to stop them. The blood moon rose like a giant red eye in the sky. Even the fog turned reddish, like we were trapped inside a nightmare. The three of us, me, Lisa, and Mike, huddled in the ranger station, watching the shadows move outside our windows. "Something's different about them tonight," Lisa whispered, peering through her binoculars. She was right. The dogmen weren't hiding anymore. They stood in plain sight at the edge of the trees, 7 feet tall, their fur black as night. Their red eyes glowed brighter than ever, matching the moon above. The normal wolves sat at their feet, hundreds of them, waiting for orders. The sight made my stomach turn. These weren't the wild wolves I'd known for years. They were like puppet wolves now, controlled by something much darker. Mike's hands shook as he checked his rifle again. "Maybe we should try to run for it. We still have the truck." A howl cut through the night so loud it rattled the windows. But this wasn't just a howl, it was words. Ancient words that hurt my ears and made my head spin. The dogmen were actually talking now. "Too late," I said. "They're coming." It started with the wolves. They came first, a wave of fur and teeth rushing at our building from all sides. Our floodlights caught their eyes, making them shine like thousands of red stars in the fog. We fired warning shots, trying to scare them off. It didn't work. They weren't afraid of anything anymore. They hit our barriers like a flood, tearing at the metal sheets we'd put up over the windows. Then the dogmen attacked. They moved so fast they were just black blurs in the fog. One moment they were at the tree line. The next, they were ripping our defenses apart with hands that were half human, half wolf. Their claws left deep gouges in the concrete walls. "The roof!" Lisa shouted. "They're getting in through the roof." We heard them up there, tearing through metal and wood like it was paper. Mike ran to check the back door. That was his last mistake. The door burst open and something huge and dark pulled him into the fog. His scream cut off too quickly. "Mike!" Lisa tried to run after him, but I grabbed her arm. "He's gone," I said, my heart breaking. "We can't help him now." We retreated to the main office, barricading the door with everything we could find. The howls were inside the building now, echoing through the halls. Red eyes peered through every crack and broken window. Lisa found an old box in the corner, something Sarah Running Deer had given us. Inside were tribal weapons, spears and arrows tipped with silver and blessed by tribal elders. "Think these will work?" she asked. "Better than bullets," I said, grabbing a spear. Our regular weapons hadn't done much damage to the dogmen. The door shuddered as something huge slammed against it. Lisa and I stood ready, the blessed weapons in our hands. The wooden barricade began to crack. "Robert," Lisa said quietly, "it's been an honor." The door exploded inward. The biggest dogman I'd ever seen stood there, at least 8 feet tall, with muscles rippling under its black fur. Its red eyes fixed on me, and it spoke in that terrible voice that was almost human. "Your time is done. These woods are ours." It happened so fast. The creature lunged at Lisa. I pushed her aside, swinging my silver-tipped spear. The dogman's claws raked down my left arm, tearing through flesh and muscle like it was nothing. The pain was unbelievable. But my spear found its mark too. The blessed silver sank deep into the creature's chest. It let out a howl that shook the whole building, not in pain but in rage. More dogmen were pouring in now. Lisa fired her rifle, the blessed bullets finding their targets. Each hit made the creatures stumble, but didn't stop them. There were too many, way too many. "The generator room!" I shouted, clutching my mangled arm. "Run!" We barely made it, slamming the heavy metal door behind us. The generator hummed loudly, and the room was warm from all the electrical equipment. But we were trapped. Blood poured from my arm. I knew right away it was bad. Really bad. Lisa tried to wrap it, but we could both see the truth. The arm was destroyed. Outside, the dogmen were gathering. We could hear them moving, surrounding us. The pack leader's voice rumbled through the door. "You fought well, but the blood moon is ours. Your kingdom falls tonight." I looked at Lisa, then at the generator's fuel tanks. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. 20 years as a firefighter had taught me exactly how things burn. "Lisa," I said, pressing the keys to my truck into her hand. "When I say run, you run. Don't stop, don't look back." "Robert, no. That's an order, Ranger." The door began to bend inward as the dogmen pressed against it. Lisa gripped her rifle, tears in her eyes. I put my good hand on the generator's main fuel line. Sometimes to stop a nightmare, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything. I waited until I heard them all outside the door. Then I smiled at Lisa and whispered, "Run." What happened next is both a blur and crystal clear in my memory. Funny how the biggest moments of your life can feel that way. As Lisa ran for the back exit, I ripped open the generator's fuel line with my good hand. The smell of gasoline filled the air. The door was about to give way, metal screaming as the dogmen tore at it. I pulled out my lighter, the same one I'd carried through 20 years of fighting forest fires. "You want these woods?" I whispered. "Then burn with them." The door burst, open. The pack leader's massive shape filled the doorway, red eyes glowing in the darkness. Behind him I could see dozens more dogmen, their bodies twisted between wolf and human forms. The sight would have frozen most people with fear, but I wasn't most people. I was a ranger, and more importantly, I was a firefighter. I flicked the lighter. The explosion threw me backward through the concrete wall. Fire roared through the generator room like a living thing, catching the dogmen in its path. Their howls changed from powerful to panicked. Fire, it turned out, was something even they feared. The flames spread fast, feeding on fuel and wood and anything else they could reach. The dogmen scattered, their pack formation breaking as the fire chased them. Even their mind control over. The regular wolves broke. I could hear normal wolf howls now as the packs fled into the forest. I lay in the snow outside, my ruined arm bleeding badly, watching the station burn. The pack leader burst out of the flames, his fur on fire. Those red eyes now filled with something I'd never seen in them before. Fear. He looked at me one last time. "This isn't over," he growled in that terrible voice. "We'll sleep. We'll heal. In 30 years. In 30 years, I managed to say through the pain, we'll be ready for you." He snarled and disappeared into the forest with the others. The blood moon above seemed dimmer now. Or maybe that was just my vision fading as I lost blood. I don't remember much after that. Lisa must have come back for me. She tells me she found me half frozen in the snow, still gripping that old lighter. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital, minus one arm but otherwise alive. The official report says the ranger station burned down due to a generator malfunction. The missing rangers, poor Tom and Mike, were listed as animal attack victims. The higher-ups didn't want to hear about dogmen or blood moons or ancient tribal warnings, but the locals know the truth. They saw the tracks, heard the howls that weren't quite wolf and weren't quite human. They know something horrible woke up in Olympic National Park that week, and something terrible happened under that blood moon. I still work as a ranger, believe it or not. Got a fancy prosthetic arm now, though it takes some getting used to. The regular wolves have gone back to normal, acting like wild wolves should. The fog has lifted, and most days the forest feels like it used to. Most days. But sometimes, when the moon is full, I hear howls in the distance that sound a little too human, and I know they're still out there sleeping, healing, waiting for the next blood moon in 30 years. Sarah Running Deer helped me set up special markers deep in the woods, blessed silver stakes that mark the boundaries of their territory. And I've started keeping records, Real records of everything that happened. The next generation of rangers needs to know the truth. Lisa stuck around too. Together we've been working with the tribal elders, learning everything we can about the dogmen, how to fight them, how to contain them. We're building a network of people who know the truth and will be ready when they wake again. The younger rangers think I'm just a crazy old one-armed ranger with too many stories. That's fine. They don't need to believe me yet. But in 25 more years, when the moon starts turning red again, they'll remember my stories. And this time we'll be prepared. I still dream about that night sometimes. About red eyes in the fog and howls that turn into words. About losing my arm and nearly losing my life. But I don't regret what I did. Sometimes the price of protecting these woods and the people who live here is high. That's what being a ranger means. The sun's setting now, as I write this. Time for my evening patrol. My new arm works just fine for holding a rifle, and I've learned to shoot pretty well with my right hand. The forest is quiet tonight, peaceful, but I keep my radio close, and I always watch the moon, because I know better than anyone in Olympic National Park. You never know what might be watching from the fog, waiting for the next blood moon to rise. I never thought I'd be writing this down, but someone needs to know what happened at Glacier Point last winter. My name is Michael Patterson, and I've seen things that no human should ever see. Things that still wake me up screaming in the middle of the night. It all started on January 15th, 1957. I remember the date clearly because it was the day everything I knew about the natural world turned upside down. The temperature gauge outside my ranger station read 70 degrees below zero, a number that shouldn't have been possible in Yosemite, even in the dead of winter. I've been a park ranger here for 5 years now, ever since I came back from the Pacific. The war, well, it left its marks on me, both inside and out. The burn scars on my left hand remind me every day of what happened to my unit in those godforsaken jungles. But that's another story. And honestly, those memories feel almost peaceful compared to what I witnessed at Glacier Point. Yosemite had always been my escape, my safe place. The vast wilderness, the towering cliffs, the peaceful silence of snow-covered peaks, they helped quiet the noise in my head. This winter, though, something changed. The silence became different, heavier, like the whole park was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My station sits near the base of Glacier Point, one of the most beautiful spots in the park. Usually I can see the massive rock face from my window, but that January the view was different. The snowfall was unlike anything I'd seen in my 15 years of mountain experience. It wasn't just heavy, it was wrong somehow. The snowflakes fell in perfect geometric patterns like someone had cut them out of paper with scientific precision. And the cold. God, the cold. It went beyond temperature. It felt alive, like it was trying to reach inside your bones. The other rangers and I stayed connected by radio, but we might as well have been on different planets. The nearest station was 10 miles away, and with the weather turning crazy, that might as well have been 100. Little did I know, this isolation would soon become our biggest nightmare. I'm writing this all down now because people need to know what's really out there in the wilderness. Not the bears or the mountain lions, those I can handle. I'm talking about something older. Something that the local tribes have been warning us about for generations, but we were too proud, too civilized to listen. They say pride comes before a fall. In my case, it came before a frozen hell. As I sit here in my new station, they moved me after the incident. My hands still shake when I think about that first warning sign, the day I found those deer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you exactly how it all began, and maybe then you'll understand why I keep my M1911 loaded with silver bullets now, and why I never, ever work the winter shift at Glacier Point anymore. This is my story. A warning, really. Because that thing, it's still out there. And in another 100 years, it'll be back. It was during my regular morning patrol that I found the first deer. The weather that morning was strange. The sun was shining, and my thermometer showed it was about 70 degrees, warm enough for me to unzip my jacket. That's why what I found made no sense at all. I was walking along the hiking trail when I spotted something through the trees. At first I thought it was just frost on a fallen log, but as I got closer, my stomach dropped. There were 3 deer completely frozen solid. Not just dead from the cold, they were frozen like statues, still standing on their legs. Their eyes were wide open, filled with fear. The weird part wasn't just that they were frozen on a warm day. It was how they were arranged, in a perfect triangle, all facing the center. In my 20 years of working outdoors, I'd never seen animals die like this. It looked deliberate. I pulled out my radio to call it in. "Base, this is Patterson. You need to see this." My voice was shakier than I wanted it to be. Static answered me, just loud, crackling static, even though the radio had been working fine just 10 minutes ago. I took some photos with my camera and marked the location on my map. As I was writing in my notebook, I noticed something else that made the hair on my neck stand up. There were tracks in the frost around the deer. Not animal tracks, not human tracks, and they were like nothing I'd ever seen before. Wide, deep impressions in the ground, but they just stopped suddenly, like whatever made them had vanished into thin air. I followed the tracks for about 50 yards before they disappeared. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath, even though the sun was still shining. My thermometer now showed 30 degrees, a 40-degree drop in minutes. That's when I heard someone behind me. "You should not be here, Ranger Patterson." I spun around, my hand automatically going to my pistol. It was Joseph Standing Bear, one of the elders from the local tribe. I hadn't heard him approach, which was strange because the ground was covered in dry leaves. "Joseph, what are you doing out here?" His face was serious, more serious than I'd ever seen it. "The signs are back," he said, looking at the frozen deer. "Just like the stories my grandfather told me. Just like 100 years ago." "What signs?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happened 100 years ago?" Joseph looked at me for a long moment, then up at the sky. "The winter spirit is awakening, the one that walks in the storm. The one that hungers." He pointed at the tracks. "These are its marks. It's choosing its hunting ground." I wanted to laugh it off. I'm not superstitious, never have been, but something about those frozen deer, those strange tracks, and the impossible temperature drop kept me quiet. "Listen carefully, Michael," Joseph said, using my first name for the first time ever. "In the next few days, you'll hear voices in the snow. You'll see things that don't make sense. When that happens, remember what I tell you now. Don't trust. What you hear, don't follow any tracks, and most importantly, don't answer if something calls your name in the storm." He turned to leave, then stopped. "And Michael, if you value your life, stay away from Glacier Point after dark. The hunger has returned, and it remembers the taste of man." I watched him walk away, disappearing between the trees like a shadow. The cold wind picked up, whistling through the branches, and for a second, just a split second, it sounded almost like words. That night, sitting in my cabin with my gun close by, I tried to write up my report about the deer. But how do you explain something like that? How do you tell your supervisors that animals are freezing solid in warm weather, that impossible tracks appear and disappear, and that an old Native American man warned you about a hungry winter spirit? I decided to wait until morning to file the report. That was my first mistake. By morning, everything would be different. By morning, the first hikers would be reported missing, and the real nightmare would begin. The next morning, my radio woke me up. Through the static, I could barely make out Tom Wilson's voice from the North Station. He sounded scared. "Patterson, missing hikers, near your area. Respond." I grabbed my radio. "Tom, you're breaking up. Say again." The static got worse, but I caught bits and pieces. "Family of 4, didn't return. Last seen, Glacier Point Trail." My heart sank. I grabbed my gear, my pistol, flashlight, first aid kit, and extra clothes. The sun wasn't up yet, but I couldn't wait. 4 people were out there in whatever was causing all this. The moment I stepped outside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt different, heavier somehow. It was like walking through an invisible fog that made every breath feel like ice in my lungs. The temperature had dropped again. My thermometer read -40 degrees. I headed toward Glacier Point Trail, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The snow crunched under my boots, but something about the sound wasn't right. It was too loud, like the whole mountain was listening. That's when I heard it. A voice calling from somewhere in the darkness. "Help! Can anybody hear me?" It sounded like a young girl, maybe 12 or 13. I started moving faster, following the voice. "Hello? This is Park Ranger Patterson. Keep calling out. Please help, we're over here." The voice seemed to move, sometimes sounding close, sometimes far away. I followed it for about 10 minutes before I realized something that made my blood run cold. The voice hadn't changed at all. Each cry for help was exactly the same, like a recording being played over and over. I remembered Joseph's warning, "Don't trust what you hear." I stopped walking. The voice called out again, but this time I noticed something else. There were no echoes. In these mountains, there should have been echoes. My radio crackled. This time it was Dave from the South Station, and his voice was shaking. Mike, are you there? We found Jimmy. Jimmy was one of our newest rangers, just started last month." "What do you mean you found him? Is he okay?" There was a long pause. He's frozen solid, Mike. Standing straight up like he was just walking. His eyes, they're open. And Mike, he's smiling." I felt sick. "Where did you find him?" "That's the thing. He's in the middle of Shadow Lake." "The lake? Dave, that lake is frozen solid. How did he—" "Mike, that's not the worst part. We found his tracks in the snow. They lead right out onto the ice, but there's only one set. Nothing leading back to shore. And there are other tracks out there. Big ones. They're all around. Jimmy. But they appear and disappear like whatever made them was what? Like it was appearing and disappearing as it walked. Mike, what's happening up there?" Before I could answer, the temperature dropped again. I could actually see it happen. A wave of frost spreading across the ground, coating everything in ice. My flashlight beam caught something that made me freeze. About 50 yards ahead, standing between the trees, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, and thin, like a shadow stretched up toward the sky. For a second, I thought I saw antlers, but I couldn't be sure because wherever I pointed my flashlight, the darkness seemed to bend around it. The radio in my hand burst into static, so loud it made me jump. Through the noise, I heard something that wasn't Dave's voice anymore. It wasn't human at all. It was Jimmy's voice, but wrong somehow, like it was being played backward and forward at the same time. "Come see, Mike. Come see what I found on the lake." I switched off the radio and started backing away slowly. The figure between the trees didn't move, but the air around it seemed to shimmer, like heat waves in summer, except these waves were made of frost. That's when I heard footsteps in the snow behind me, slow, heavy footsteps. And they were getting closer. I ran. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, back toward my station. The whole time I could hear those footsteps behind me, never speeding up, never slowing down, just keeping pace. And mixed in with the sound of the steps were voices, dozens of voices. Some I recognized, some I didn't, all calling out for help. When I finally reached my station and slammed the door shut, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the lock. I looked out the window, expecting to see whatever was chasing me. There was nothing there, just the darkness and the gently falling snow. But as I watched, the snowflakes started forming patterns in the air, perfect geometric shapes, like the ones I'd seen before. And written in the frost on my window, appearing as if drawn by an invisible finger, was a message. The hunger wakes. I spent the rest of the night with my back against the wall, my gun in my hand, watching the snow fall and listening to the voices in the storm. By morning, we had reports of 3 more missing hikers, and the temperature had dropped another 30 degrees. Whatever was out there, it was just getting started. Morning came, but the sun didn't. The sky was filled with dark clouds that seemed to hang too low, like they were trying to touch the ground. I knew I had to go back out there. More people were missing, and it was my job to find them. I radioed, base camp to let them know my plan. I'm going to follow Jimmy's last known route. Maybe I can find some clues about what happened to him. Be careful, Mike, Dave answered. 3 more rangers went out last night. None of them have reported back. I checked my gear twice. This time I added extra flares, hand warmers, and a thermos of hot coffee. My hands were shaking as I loaded fresh bullets into my M1911 pistol. After what I'd seen last night, I wasn't taking any chances. The snow was deep, almost up to my knees in some places. But what scared me wasn't the snow. It was the silence. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of branches creaking. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. I found the first set of tracks about a mile from my station. They were ranger boots, probably Jimmy's, heading toward Shadow Lake. Next to these tracks were those other ones, the impossible ones that appeared and disappeared. Only now I could see them better in the daylight. They were huge, like someone had pressed giant deer hooves into the snow, but they walked like a person, 2 feet at a time. The tracks led me to a cave I'd never seen before. That wasn't right. I knew every cave in my area. This one looked like it had been here forever, with icicles hanging around its mouth like teeth. My radio crackled. Through the static, I heard a familiar voice that made my heart stop. Mike? Mike, is that you? It was Johnny Chen's voice, my best friend from the war, the one who died saving my life in the Pacific. We need help, Mike. We're trapped in here, just like in the jungle. Remember the jungle, Mike? My hands started shaking. It wasn't possible. Johnny was dead. I'd watched him die. But the voice kept calling, and now other voices joined in. More of my old war buddies, all of them dead. All of them calling my name. I knew it was a trap. I knew it wasn't real. But I had to look. I had to know. The cave. Entrance was covered in strange ice formations, perfect squares and triangles of frost that seemed to glow from within. My flashlight beam showed a tunnel going deep into the mountain. That's when I saw them. Bodies. Dozens of them, perfectly preserved in the ice walls of the cave. Some were old, wearing clothes from another century. Others were newer. I recognized 2 hikers who had gone missing last week. They all had the same expression, a look of pure terror frozen on their faces. Something moved in the darkness ahead. Something big. My flashlight caught it for just a second. It was like looking at a nightmare come to life. The thing was tall. Its head almost touched the cave ceiling. Its body was skinny, like a skeleton wrapped in gray, frozen skin. But its face was what gave me nightmares for years after. It looked like a deer skull, but wrong somehow. With too many eye sockets, all of them glowing with a blue light. Huge antlers grew from its head, made of what looked like black ice. The temperature dropped so fast my flashlight cracked. Ice started forming on my clothes, spreading like living frost. It spoke. Not with one voice, but with dozens. All the voices of its victims at once. You came. They always come when we call with the right voices. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, but the ice was spreading up my legs. I could feel it trying to freeze me in place. The thing moved so fast, not walking or running, but flowing like a shadow across the snow. I remembered my flares. With frozen fingers, I pulled one out and lit it. The red light filled the cave, and the thing screamed. A sound like breaking, ice and winter wind. The flare gave me just enough time. I made it to the cave entrance, but the thing was right behind me. I felt its cold fingers grab my left hand. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever felt, like my blood was turning to ice. I pulled away and fired my pistol without looking back. The bullets hit ice somewhere in the darkness. By the time I made it outside, 2 of my fingers were black with frostbite. I ran all the way back to my station. Behind me, I could hear it laughing with the voices of the dead. When I finally got back and locked my door, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. There was a trail of frozen footprints leading away from my station. My footprints, which meant that thing had been here watching my station, waiting for me to leave. I looked at my frozen fingers. The doctors would have to remove them later, but that wasn't what scared me. What scared me was the pattern of the frostbite. Perfect, geometric shapes just like the ice in the cave. It had marked me, and somehow I knew this was just the beginning. After losing my fingers to frostbite, I spent 2 days in the ranger station's medical cabin, but I couldn't rest. Not while that thing was out there hunting people. I needed answers. I started with the old ranger logs. Something Joseph had said kept bothering me, just like 100 years ago. I dug through the dusty files until I found what I was looking for, records from 1857. What I read made my blood run cold. January 1857. 7 settlers disappeared, near Glacier Point. The only evidence found was their belongings, arranged in perfect geometric patterns in the snow. The temperature dropped to impossible levels that winter. I kept reading. The missing settlers weren't the worst part. A rescue party of 12 men went looking for them. Only one came back. His written statement gave me chills. It called to us with their voices. Mary, John, little Sarah, we heard them all. But when we found them, dear God, the ice, the antlers, those eyes in the dark, it wasn't human, it was never human. The man who wrote this died 3 days later. The doctors said it was frostbite, but according to the notes, his body was completely frozen even though they kept him next to a hot stove. I needed to know more. I drove to the local tribal library, my bandaged hand throbbing with every bump in the road. Joseph was there like he'd been expecting me. You've seen it now, haven't you? He asked, looking at my injured hand. You've seen the hunger that walks. He took me to a back room and showed me some old paintings on animal hide. They showed the same creature I'd seen, the tall skeletal figure with the deer skull face and black antlers. Our people called it Wendigo, Joseph said, a spirit of winter and hunger. Every 100 years, when the stars align just right, it wakes up and hunts. But why? I asked. Why does it take people? Joseph's face got dark. It feeds on more than just flesh. It feeds on fear, on despair, on the last moments of hope leaving a person's eyes. The more scared its victims are, the more it likes the taste. He showed me more paintings. They told a story of how hundreds of years ago the tribe's medicine, men tried to trap the Wendigo in ice using sacred rituals, but they could only hold it for 100 years at a time. The ice that holds it is melting, Joseph said, and it's hungrier than ever. I spread out a map on the table. Look at this. All the disappearances form a pattern. I connected the locations with a pen. It's making the same symbol that's in the ice formations. Joseph nodded slowly. It's marking its hunting ground, creating a place of power. Once the pattern is complete, what happens then? Then nothing will be able to stop it. The eternal winter will begin. I checked the map again. There's one point missing in the pattern, one place it hasn't marked yet. Glacier Point, Joseph said quietly, where it was first trapped, where the old rituals were performed. As if on cue, my radio crackled to life. Dave's voice came through, panicked. Mike! They found 3 more bodies, all frozen, arranged, in some kind of pattern on Glacier Point, and Mike, they're fresh. Whatever did this is still up there. I looked at Joseph. He handed me a small leather pouch. Sacred herbs, he said. Burn them in a circle. It might give you some protection. But Mike, he grabbed my arm. Remember, it will try to trick you. It will use the voices of people you know, people you trust. Whatever you hear up there, don't answer. Don't even listen. I stood up to leave, but Joseph had one more thing to say. The stars align tomorrow night. If it completes the pattern before midnight, nothing will be able to stop it. Ever. As I drove back to my station to gear up, the snow started falling again. Through my windshield, I watched the snowflakes forming those now familiar geometric patterns. The hunt wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one running away. Back at my station, things had gotten worse. Much worse. The radio was picking up nothing but static and whispers now. The phones were dead. Outside, the snow was falling so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows with each gust. Dave managed to get one last message through. Rescue helicopters. Turned back. Ice forming on rotors. Can't reach you. Temperature 80 below. Not possible. Then his voice changed. becoming deeper, hollow. Come to Glacier. Point, Mike, everyone's waiting for you here. I switched off the radio. My hands were shaking as I packed my gear. Flares, rope, the sacred herbs from Joseph, extra ammunition, and my trusty M11911. I'd loaded it with special bullets, each one carved with the tribal symbols Joseph had shown me. It might not help, but I had to try something. Looking through my station window, I saw more rangers and hikers arriving, seeking shelter from the impossible storm. Their faces were pale, scared. They'd seen things out there too. The trees are moving, one hiker told me, his voice trembling. Not from the wind. They're moving by themselves, closing the trails behind us. Another ranger, Sarah, spoke up. We found Rick's group, all frozen solid, standing in a circle, holding hands like they were playing a game, their eyes. She couldn't finish the sentence. We were trapped. 23 people in my small station, and the storm was getting worse. Our food wouldn't last more than a few days. The emergency generators were running low on fuel and the temperature kept dropping. That's when we heard it, a sound that made everyone freeze. Children laughing outside in the storm. My kids. A woman stood up. Those are my kids. They've been missing since yesterday. Before anyone could stop her, she ran to the door. Wait. I grabbed her arm. Remember what I told you all? It tricks people. It uses voices we know. But she pulled away and ran outside. 3 others went after her, trying to help. We never saw them again. Through the window, I watched the snow swallow them up. Then the laughing changed. It wasn't children anymore. It was the woman's voice calling for help over and over. Night fell, but it didn't get darker. The snow seemed to glow with a pale blue light. Ice started forming on the inside of our windows, making those same geometric patterns I'd seen before. The patterns were growing, spreading across the walls, the floor, everywhere. Look. Sarah pointed at the ceiling. The ice was forming words. Hunger grows, the pattern nears completion, come to the point. A loud crack made us all jump. The window glass was freezing, getting ready to shatter. We wouldn't be safe here much longer. That's when my injured hand started, burning. The frozen fingers were turning black, spreading the geometric patterns up my arm. I could feel it. The Wendigo was calling me. It wanted me to come to Glacier Point. Through the frosted windows, I saw something moving in the storm. Multiple shapes, tall and thin, circling our station. The wind carried their voices, everyone we'd lost calling out to us. We need to get these people out of here, I told Sarah. Take them through the emergency tunnel to the valley station. Don't stop, don't listen to any voices, and don't look back. What about you? She asked. I checked my gun and picked up my pack. I'm going to Glacier Point. That's crazy. You'll die up there. If I don't go, if that thing completes its pattern by midnight, everyone dies. The eternal winter begins. I showed her the map with the pattern. Look, Glacier Point is the last spot. It's where this has to end. The ice was spreading faster. Now, the windows started to crack. You have 10 minutes, I told Sarah. Get everyone out. I'll try to draw it away from you. I opened the door, letting in a blast of frozen air. The storm hit me like a wall, and in the swirling snow, I saw them, dark figures with antlers watching me with glowing blue eyes. Not just one Wendigo now. Its power had grown so strong it could be in many places at once. As I stepped outside, I heard Sarah organizing the evacuation behind me. I hoped they'd make it, but right now I had to focus on my job, getting to Glacier Point before midnight. Before the pattern could be completed, the Wendigo's voices called to me from the storm, using every trick they knew. But I wasn't running away this time. This time I was running straight toward them. The climb to Glacier Point was the hardest thing I've ever done. The wind tried to knock me down with every step. The snow was so deep I had to fight for each foot forward. Ice formed on my clothes, making them stiff and heavy. My watch showed 11:15 p.m. 45 minutes until midnight. Through the storm, I saw them, dark shapes moving all around me. Sometimes they looked like deer, sometimes like tall, thin people. Their blue eyes followed me, but they didn't attack. They were hurting me, I realized, driving me exactly where they wanted me to go. When I finally reached Glacier Point, I understood why. In the clearing at the top, The snow had been arranged in a massive pattern, all geometric shapes, all perfect despite the howling wind. And in the middle were the bodies, all the missing people, frozen solid, standing in a circle. Park rangers, hikers, even the woman who had run out of my station. Their faces were frozen in terror, their arms reaching toward the sky. The wind died suddenly. The snow stopped. Everything went quiet. Then I heard a voice behind me. My father's voice. He died when I was 12. Son, I've been waiting for you. I didn't turn around. You're not my father. The voice changed, becoming many voices at once. No, we are hunger. We are winter. We are the end of all things. I turned slowly. The Wendigo stood there, not multiple shapes now, but one massive figure, tall as 3 men. Its antlers scraped the clouds, its skull face glowing with blue fire. The geometric patterns covered its entire body, pulsing with light. Why? I asked. Why do you do this? Because it is beautiful, it said, spreading its arms. The moment hope dies. The moment warmth fades. The moment life becomes ice. We have waited 100 years to complete our work. It pointed at the pattern in the snow. One more. We need just one more to complete the pattern. You will be our last. That's why you marked me. I held up my frozen hand, now completely black with geometric frost patterns. You chose me from the start. Yes, from the moment you found our deer. Your fear was perfect. The Wendigo moved, closer. The air around it was so cold it hurt to breathe. Join them, it said, gesturing to the frozen circle. Be part of our eternal winter. I reached into my pocket, feeling the pouch of sacred herbs Joseph had given me. In my other hand, I gripped my pistol. You're right, I said. I was afraid, but not anymore. Quick as I could, I threw the herbs in a circle around me and lit them with my lighter. The Wendigo screamed, a sound like breaking glaciers. A barrier of warm air surrounded me, but I knew it wouldn't last long. The herbs were already freezing. That's when I remembered something else, something I'd seen on my way up. The avalanche control station. We used dynamite there to prevent dangerous snow buildup. The Wendigo saw the realization in my eyes. It lunged forward, but the burning herbs held it back. If I can't stop you, I said, I can at least bury you for another 100 years. I fired my gun at the snow above us once, twice, 3 times. For a moment, nothing happened. Then came the rumble. The Wendigo's blue eyes widened. No! The whole mountain seemed to move. A wall of snow and ice rushed down toward us. The Wendigo reached for me with its frozen hands. If we go, you go with us. Fine by me, I said, and fired my last shot. The avalanche hit like a frozen tidal wave. The last thing I saw was the Wendigo's face as the snow buried us both. I should have died there. Maybe I did for a while. They found me 3 days later, half frozen, but somehow alive. The search team said it was the biggest avalanche they'd ever seen. It filled the whole valley with ice. They never found the bodies of the missing people. The ice patterns were gone too, buried under tons of snow. Some folks said I imagined the whole thing, that the cold and loneliness had made me see things, but they didn't see my hand. The doctors managed to save most of it, but those 2 frozen fingers had to go. And sometimes, on cold nights, I can see traces of geometric patterns in the scars, glowing faintly blue. The tribal elders come every year now to perform their rituals at Glacier Point. They say the Wendigo is sleeping again, trapped in its ice prison. They say we have 100 years before it wakes. I won't be around to see it next time. But if you're ever in Yosemite during winter, and you hear voices calling from the storm, remember my story. Don't answer, don't look back, and whatever you do, don't follow the tracks in the snow, because somewhere under Glacier Point in its tomb of ice, the hunger is waiting, and it remembers the taste of fear. Epilogue. 1 year later. I don't work at Glacier Point anymore. They moved me to a station in the valley where it's warmer. The doctors say my hand will never fully heal, but at least the pain has mostly stopped. Sarah still runs the old station. She calls me sometimes, usually late at night when the wind gets strong. She says she's been seeing things in the snow, geometric patterns that appear and disappear. I tell her it's just ice crystals, normal winter stuff, but we both know better. Last week, Joseph came to visit me. He looked older, more tired. The ice is melting faster these days, he said. Global warming, they call it. But I wonder, he didn't need to finish. I've been checking the temperatures up at Glacier Point. They've been dropping in strange patterns even during summer. Small geometric shapes of frost appear on windows on the hottest days. Yesterday, I got a package. No return address. Inside was an old photo from 1857, yellowed and faded. It shows a park ranger standing in front of Glacier Point. His left hand is bandaged. In the background, barely visible in the snow, stands a tall, thin shape with antlers. On the back of the photo, written in geometric patterns of faded ink, are 3 words: "Hunger never dies." I burned the photo, but this morning, I found it on my desk again, perfect and unharmed. And my scarred fingers are starting to itch, tracing patterns in the air as I sleep. They say we have 100 years before it wakes again. I'm not so sure. The winter is coming early this year, and sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I hear voices calling my name.